Welcome everybody to this being our last distance education strategy session of the 2020-21 school year. And this one's going to be focused on building digital literacy opportunities and expanding the range of digital tools for instruction. And before we get started, my colleague Ebony Vandross is just going to share information about how to engage during the session using Zoom.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. For those that are unfamiliar with Zoom, you can find the control panel at the bottom of your window. To use the chat, you can click on the chat icon on the control panel, and when you make comments, please select to everyone so that everyone can see your comments and not just the host. To access the nonverbal feedback features, you can click on the participant icon and a row of icons will pop up, and we'll ask you to use that hand raise icon in case you have a tech issue and I don't see your comment in the chat. The hand raise feature will get my attention. If you have any other questions, please email me at the email address in the fourth box. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And so if this is your first distance education strategy session, welcome to those of you who have been before. Thanks for joining us again. The process of these sessions is pretty simple. The way this works and the invite that you have on your calendar is for an hour, we are going to be talking with two different educators who give lightning talks that are about 20 minutes on different topics. And today we're really pleased to bring two folks from the same organization, the BRIA Charter School, which is based in Washington, DC. And we brought these two educators in because in the midst of the past year, they've been doing really great work at BRIA on supporting students in learning how to use new technologies, all of the new technologies that we were suddenly immersing ourselves with in the midst of the pandemic, and had a really structured approach to providing supports for those learners. And so our first lightning talk is going to be Jamie Sadownik, who is the Technology Integration Coordinator at BRIA. And he's going to be talking about the work that's been done to sort of build up the supports for students and helping them develop the technology skills that they need, in particular for ESOL learners that are engaged at BRIA. And then our second talk is going to be Kirsten Witkowski, who is the Adult Education Coordinator. And she's going to be talking about then moving one step further beyond just the how-tos and helping students be set for success in using those tools, but then actually some of the things that they've done to integrate technology into their virtual ESOL classroom. After that hour, we'll have again 20 minutes with each. We'll have Q&A, a little bit of time for Q&A with each of the two presenters. And then we have a half hour that follows from 2 to 2:30 Eastern. Sorry, I'm in Central Time, where we will have breakout discussions with the two presenters. So depending on your interest in diving a little deeper into what either Jamie or Kirsten presented, you'll have the option to join a breakout room for that half hour at the top of the hour at 2 to discuss further, ask questions, even ask to see some of the things that they shared during their lightning talks. With me today, as you just met, is Ebony Vandross from World Education and Jen Vanek, my colleague, who along with myself will be facilitating those breakout rooms with Jamie and Kirsten after their presentations. And speaking of just one of the reasons we wanted to have this is as we're looking and moving forward and thinking about what's next and how we get back to quote unquote normal, a lot of folks and a lot of the things that we're hearing from the field is around just planning and getting ourselves ready to sort of structure having more structure around whatever it is that you're offering, whether it be hybrid, in-person, remote, some mix in between, blend flex, high flex. There's all sorts of things that have entered our vocabulary in the past year and things that we've learned that some things that work really well in regard to distance education and remote instruction. And so as a reminder, as you are thinking about that planning moving forward, we do have two really great resources to support different aspects of your remote instruction. One is our blended learning or distance education and blended learning handbook. And then the other is a set of e-learning modules modules that were developed in the fall in response to the pandemic and actually built off the learnings that we had over the course of the first 4 to 5 months of the pandemic. And that's our Transforming Distance Education course. And so the link that we have here, and hopefully one of my colleagues has chatted it, is a set of Wakelet collections that includes the sort of relevant chapters in each of these areas. So maybe you're focused on planning or outreach and recruitment. You want to do more work around sort of bringing students back in, screening and orientation, which is setting students up for success, and then instruction and assessment. But we have Wakelets for each of these areas that include the relevant chapters from the handbook, as well as the modules from the Transforming Distance Education course. And all of the content within both the handbook and the modules is chock full of ideas and samples of things to do that have been sort of gathered over the course of years of research and come from the adult education field and practitioners who are actually engaged in distance and remote instruction. So I encourage you to check those out. We have a few states who have actually grabbed the Transforming Distance Education course, which is an openly licensed course, and they've added it to their state level LMS to provide professional development, either synchronous or asynchronous with their instructors. So I encourage you to check out both of these resources. And then typically we'd also at this point be talking about our Fourth Fridays. We have an ongoing series of webinars with our friends at Pro Literacy. These distance education strategies that we're at right now is the second Fridays, and then we have a Fourth Fridays. Those are going to be on hold until fall of 2021. We're taking the summer off, and then Pro Literacy has their big conference in September. And so they'll be planning for that. And so the Fourth Friday webinars, as they are on hold until the fall, but in their place, and actually in the place of these second Fridays, the EdTech Center just ran a EdTech makerspace focused on digital skills. And that project engaged about a little over 50 educators who on May 21st and June 4th came together for 3 hours. And we worked to identify the core skills using a framework called the Seattle Digital Equity Initiative Framework that basically defines the digital skills that anyone needs, any adult needs for communication, for workplace, for privacy and security, and other areas that are in their framework. So teams worked in those sort of domains to identify what the core skills were, to identify what learners and teachers need to do. And they also started the work of aligning some of the great resources that we know are out there, such as GCF Learn Free, Google Applied Digital Skills. And they are basically working to build a digital skills library. On the 25th of this month, we are going to share their progress, and we are going to share a showcase. It's actually an app that highlights at least one resource from all 75 of the skills within that Seattle framework. And that work is going to continue over the summer with folks who are involved in this project. But based on their feedback of this initial work, we are going to be running EdTech's Maker Camp, basically is sort of the arts and crafts that maybe your children are doing this summer, hopefully if they're going back to camp, where we come together in collaborative co-creation activities during those second and fourth Fridays around topics that we feel are needed in terms of additions to the digital skills library. So maybe it's more how-to articles, or maybe how-to guides on specific things that we know that students need to do, or visual vocabulary is one of the things that came out of our Makerspace project that people are really interested in doing sort of some crowdsourced design slams around, well, how would we create some visual vocabulary resources that could be built out and then shared as part of the library. So it's totally experimental. We're going to see how it goes, but it's going to be very engaging where we're sharing ideas and sharing input and actually getting our hands sort of digitally dirty and creating resources that ultimately, hopefully, will either go into the library as is or might form sort of the basis of future EdTech Makerspace projects. So the 25th, we'll be sharing what's been done so far. And then we will be outlining what those 4 dates that you see for the summer, what we'll be doing during those Maker Camp events. So really hopeful that you can join us for that. So without further ado, I want to introduce our first presenter, and that is Jamie Sadownik. And he is going to share some of the things that he's done and Bria has done over the past year to build technology skills for their learners. And Jamie, I'm going to hand over control to you.
Great, thank you. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you, Jeff. My name is Jamie. I am the Technology Integration Coordinator for Bria Public Charter School. I'm also an adult ESOL teacher and digital literacy teacher. So today for my talk, I'm going to share a little bit about Bria's planning process for the 2021 school year. And then we'll look at sort of what I consider to be sort of our 3 pillars of digital literacy acquisition that led to a lot of success this year.
I am here to tell you about how was my experience with Bria using technology. At the beginning, it was very hard for me because I never used computer before. All this was new for me. I decided to take classes with Bria. It was very helpful for me. And now it's more easy for me to use computer and to use technology. Thank you for all the teachers to teach me how to find any information on the internet and how to make my homework, how to find my feedback documents, any information on the computer is more easy for me now. I really happy to learn how to use technology, and I want to say thanks again for all your hard work for us. Thank you.
So Bria Public Charter School is a school that is devoted to family literacy. So we work with adults and their children. So in pre-pandemic times, the parents and the children are in the same building, learning in different classrooms, and there are different times that they come together. For parents, they're learning English as a second language, digital literacy, and parenting. We have infant and toddler programs as well as preschool. So one of our first things we realized at the start of the year is that our students do not have computers and many do not have internet access. So we undertook a really large initiative to distribute over 800 devices to our students, as well as connect 213 families with Wi-Fi. We recognize that our program is a public charter school, and that sort of can afford us the resources to do this. We realize that not every program will be able to provide resources on this level. So we did a survey in the winter to check on how our students were feeling about remote learning. 57% of parents reported that they felt more confident in helping their children with remote learning. And the number that we were most excited about, 82% of our students felt that their technology skills had increased during the pandemic. So what are some of these, we asked them, what are some of these skills that they've learned? So we did an analysis, and these are some of the highlights. So in terms of computer skills, all levels from basic 1 through advanced 2 were logging into their Chromebook, charging their Chromebook, opening different programs, had the ability to navigate between Zoom and other programs. They were able to use Zoom functions such as camera on and off, sending messages in the chat, clicking links to other websites from the chat. And some of our higher levels were able to utilize Google Docs, email, and most levels were also able to read and respond to teacher comments within our learning management system. Overall, we identified over 89 essential technology skills that students learned just in the first 2 terms of this school year, which was really exciting, not just for them, but also could really empower them to help their children. And so this is a document that we use to track all of these items. So we actually had a teacher go in and really put all of this together. So at the top, you can see the different levels and then all of the different skills. We have a category for Zoom, for Google Classroom, other Google applications, using a device, other EdTech tools. And just recently, we had a meeting with all the teachers where they went in and updated this with new skills that were learned, or maybe a skill that was in Intermediate 1 had learned, but now Intermediate 2 also learned, and updated that document. And we are going to then use this to build a new digital literacy curriculum for our upcoming year. So let's talk about sort of how we got to this place. So sort of the 3 pillars were developing some new teams, really a really scaffolded approach to student digital literacy learning, and finally differentiated teacher training. So the new teams that we built were the instructional design team and the digital integration team. Next slide. So this is, I am part of the digital integration team, and this is something that I provided to teachers just to sort of know how we can help them. So they can sign up for office hours, they can talk about how to utilize technology for a particular objective, if they'd like me to model a lesson, or if they need us to create tutorials or resources for them. Next slide. So let's look at how we supported students. So one really important aspect was deciding what platform our students were going to use. Thankfully, digital literacy had always been a part of BRIA's curriculum. And we know that they had used Google Classroom previously. So not extensively, but they had at least some familiarity with it. So we decided to continue with Google Classroom and really expand on its capabilities. Google Classroom also really had a benefit where there's a calendar view, which connected all the assignments, Zoom classes, everything that would make it easier for students. For workforce, we decided to use Schoology. It's a little more of an advanced tool, and for students that might want to do university in the future, it's excellent practice for them. So student instruction, we took a really scaffolded approach. We started the year just using WhatsApp because that was something that students were familiar with, so they were learning on their phones. So digital skills, and from there we moved to using laptops. Okay. We provided video training on Chromebook, Zoom, and other essentials. So these were used without any dialogue or any text. So they were just visual guides. So really any literacy level students could get onto that video training. We also provided paper guides in every language that students spoke for reference. We also established a help desk line. So for 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 8 p.m., students can call and speak with a staff member one-on-one to get help. And we also repurposed tools such as goguardian and Chrome Remote Desktop. You can tap again, Kirsten. Yeah. So goguardian is originally designed really as an in-person tool for teachers to see, oh, is a student on YouTube instead of on their assignment. But we really used it as a way to check that students were on task. And if they couldn't find a link, we could actually open tabs for them and close tabs, send them messages. You can annotate on their screen. So it's like, click here. So these tools were really valuable. Chrome Remote Desktop as well allowed us to have remote access to the students' computers. So really helpful. Yeah, let's, I think maybe we can, well, let's take a look. This is one of the visual videos that we created for students on how to set up their Chromebook. Okay, so yeah, these videos are very helpful for our students. These are also some examples of our multilingual guides. So here's how to open up the Chromebook in Amharic. And on the next slide, how to turn in an assignment in Google Classroom in Portuguese. Another exciting thing was developing a new orientation system. So previously we had full open enrollment. Now students could join at 4 different times a year. And we offered a 2-week-long orientation that capped off with students learning the basics of Zoom, Google Calendar, Google Classroom, that really set them up for success when they initially joined the class. We offered this at 2 different levels. And we continued to update and improve the orientation with lessons learned from different terms. So at the start of the year, many students would call the help desk saying, "My computer's dead, it's not working." And we realized they were not plugging them in. So we added that key information that, like a cell phone, you need to charge your laptop. Okay. And so finally, we'll take a look at how we approach teacher training. As we know, teachers came to this year with a wide variety of experiences and comfort level with technology. So we started off with a summer intensive on how to teach effectively on Zoom. And while this did focus on kind of the nuts and bolts, we also really talked about how to bring sort of that community aspect that was so important in our classrooms into the Zoom classroom. At the beginning of the year, we had weekly professional development. We also introduced new technology tools for feedback and interaction. That was something that was really important for that sort of two-way communication between teachers and students. So we looked at what is going to be the best way to do that in a way that's also technology, that's digital literacy friendly. Next slide. And something that was really helpful this year was we had 2 teachers in each virtual classroom. So there was a lead teacher responsible for the content, and then there was a support teacher that was dealing with admitting students and muting students, and if students had a tech problem, they could handle it while the lead teacher could continue teaching. The digital integration team also would push in and offer one-to-one support for teachers. So if they wanted to take on a big project, our team would come in and help them execute that. We also really developed a situation where there was a lot of collaboration within each level among, say, all basic teachers or intermediate teachers. And then with the instructional design team, there was sharing across levels. So we could really continually get feedback and support each other. And we had weekly level meetings as well. Something that we tried, which was successful, was differentiating our professional development. So the full group Training sessions on a particular tool didn't work for everybody. So there were a few different things we tried. We created several self-paced options, so teachers could choose, I really want to learn about Google Classroom, so I'm going to focus on that. Or I really want to learn more advanced skills for utilizing the webcam and Google Slides to create a photo album with my class. So they could really select what they wanted to learn about. And later in the year, I started doing opt-in PD. There are some teachers that are really excited about technology and want to learn everything new and kind of keep expanding their knowledge. And there are others that say, you know what, I know Google Classroom, I know Zoom, I'm happy, I don't need anything else right now. And that's fine too. So we had a lot of optional PD in the second half of the year. And we also had technology office hours. So teachers could come to me if they wanted to sit and just work through an idea for something they wanted to do in class. Okay. This is sort of a master document. It's all of the tutorials, teacher trainings that we've done throughout the year. So you can see some are assignments, some are guides, some are videos, and we've put them all into one repository so that teachers can access them anytime. We also have resources for students, a lot of things on like Zoom and Google Classroom that teachers can turn to in future years, and even some administrative tools such as our like technology contract. Okay, so to finish up, I wanted to share a reflection from Jose, or Mr. G. He is a Basic 2 student, and this is from a conference with his teacher, Elaine, talking about his experience with remote learning and technology this year.
I was talking to Mr. G today, and in his conference, I was like, how are you doing learning at home? What's some stuff you learned about? And he gave me so many good gems about technology. He said, he was like, well, it's been almost a year since the pandemic started. And when the pandemic started, I thought to myself, like, oh, well, there goes a while. Like, I'm not going to be learning for a while. Like, I'm not going to have class. And then even at the beginning of this year, he was like, I wasn't sure I could do it. Like, I remember sitting on the phone for hours at a time trying to get this done, and I thought, like, I can't do it. And he was like, but now here we are, like a year later, like I haven't lost a year at all. I've learned so much. Like, I can use a computer. I had never touched a computer like individually, like independently before this. And he's like, and I can do the homework by myself. I don't have to call Bria every time. I don't have to call you every time. Like, he's like, I can do things on my own on the computer now, and it's amazing. And I was like, it is amazing. You have done so much.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much, Jamie. I think we did have a couple of questions in the chat, but I think Penny asked a really great question that maybe you can address in the breakout room. But for now, I think just in the interest of time, I think we should move on to Kristen in the second half of the presentation and the lightning talks.
Sounds
But
good.
thanks again, Jamie.
Great. Well, I'll just continue on as I'm already sharing. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kirsten Witkowski, and I am an adult ed coordinator as well as an instructor at Bria. This year, I taught intermediate 2 class. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit about the classroom applications to what Jamie just talked about, specific to our ESOL program. And we'll look sort of at 3 different areas. The first is how technology helped foster students' independent study skills, how we made our Zoom classes more dynamic with the use of tech tools, and how we use technology to carry out project-based learning remotely. So first, taking a look at those independent study skills. As Jamie mentioned earlier, we used Google Classroom as our LMS this year. And in particular, we debated for a while and decided that we are going to stick to using just the calendar view of Google Classroom. We were able to link all of the students' assignments within Google Classroom, as well as links to different Zoom events all into one view. And we felt that this was a much more simplified view for students. They didn't need to learn how to navigate between different pages and tabs, and it was just a few clicks. And this was particularly helpful for our low literacy students, as well as, of course, any student with limited digital skills. And it had the added benefit of providing everyday calendar literacy practice for our lowest literacy students. And once students were able to open links, find links, they could then access everything that they needed for class from this one calendar independently. And we did, I will say that we recognized at the beginning of the year that we needed to spend more time teaching these digital skills. So we did sacrifice some of our dedicated English time during Zoom class for students to practice those skills during Zoom. And then, they had to repeat them every single day in order to connect to their Zoom class and complete their assignments. One aspect in particular that we really found helpful within Google Classroom is the view your work page from the students view. This shows students a list of their assignments. It has the due date and the status of their assignment, whether or not they've turned it in and what their final result was. And using this view also helped students practice literacy, digital literacy, in terms of recognizing icons. So for example, they could see if their teacher had left a comment on an assignment. They could also see the status of their assignment and therefore keep track of their own progress, as well as see what work was missing so that they could go back and make up missed work. And this was something that we had never really found an effective way to do when we were in person. So we really appreciated this very easy way for students to have all of their work in one place. And we made this accessible to them again by creating a calendar event on each student's individual calendar. We did have to log in as each student into their account and create that event for them, but it just showed up every week. They just had to do 2 clicks and they could easily navigate to this page. And finally, on that same calendar, we were then able to share resources for self-study. So we could post the Google Slides from every Zoom class directly on that day's column. So students who missed class could open up the slides and read through them themselves. And we could also post resources for extra practice on a weekly basis using digital tools that students were already familiar with, Quizlet, Kahoots that they could do as homework, or sort of repeat options for assignments that they could do multiple times. And again, this was really a benefit of digital learning because they had this all in one place, and some students really took advantage of this, and we saw that their language skills kind of took off with this independent practice. All right, so next, looking at Zoom class. There are a couple of tools in particular that we found really made Zoom class a lot more engaging for all students. So the first is sort of best practice to provide multiple modes of engagement. And we really tried to take advantage of all of the different ways that students could engage in class, taking into consideration their different levels of digital literacy, as well as the technology that they might be using that day to access class. So we might provide them the option to use the camera and use their fingers to answer a question by showing 1, 2, or 3, or thumbs up, thumbs down. They could also use their microphone. Eventually, they learned how to use the chat, so they could type either a message to the whole group or directly to the teacher. The higher levels did learn how to use reactions, and we did use some polls. That said, I will say that we really encourage students to use the Chromebook as much as possible to access Zoom class, because there are some limited functions using a phone to access Zoom. And once they were on their Chromebook, that also freed up their phone to be a supplemental tool. And so we could play, for example, Kahoot live in class. They looked at the screen for the question and used their phone to answer the question. Or they might reference a resource that their teachers sent to them in their WhatsApp class group in order to participate in a group activity, a speaking activity, something else during Zoom class on the computer. That said, I will say that students continue to access class on their phones. They might be at work or on public transportation. So I think, it was a practice that teachers were still always trying to keep in mind the different technologies that students might be using and trying to provide an alternative option for students that were on their phones during class. Our other major challenge that we encountered at the beginning of the year was how to continue to provide students with content in a breakout room when the teacher was no longer in every room to be sharing a screen. And we really found that Jamboard was the simplest and most useful tool to enable us to do that. So Jamboard is a Google version of a whiteboard that you can create. You can put pictures, you can put text on it. It can be manipulated by students, but we so far have only really used it as a view-only tool that they look at to either see the task instructions again while they're in the breakout room, or it might provide them with some sort of content for discussion. And we really liked Jamboard because it has multiple pages, and so it allows for differentiation and choice. And so the way we would use this is we would create the Jamboard and we would send the link in the chat so students could open up the Jamboard on a second window and then have that open as they went to their breakout rooms. So I'll show you an example of one that we've used from our intermediate 2 class of studying job titles and job duties. And so we sent them this link, and in groups, students had to take turns thinking of a job title and then describing it using the job duties while their classmates looked at this same page and tried to guess which word they were describing. So it enabled us to create a little bit more of an interactive game in a Zoom setting. Up here, you can see that there are multiple pages. So it also allowed students a little bit of choice. They could navigate between multiple pages, or students who finished quickly and did all of them on one page. It provides an extension for them to move to the next page and continue to do more. And so we really appreciate the differentiation of Jamboard. The other thing important to note about sending links in the chat, we needed to spend a lot of time teaching students how to switch between screens. So once Jamboard opens, they no longer see their classmates in Zoom. And so we luckily, since we gave everyone Chromebooks, Chromebook has a specific button, which we called the navigate button, but I think it's called show windows, which allows students to just touch a button on their keyboard and then select the screen that they want to see. And at our most recent conferences, this was the #1 skill that students mentioned that they really appreciated learning, was how to navigate between multiple screens. And finally, we used lots of different technology tools for exit tickets. We found that exit tickets, especially in the virtual environment, are extremely important because it might be the only time that a teacher hears individually from a student. And the students really appreciated having that space to know that their teacher was hearing from them individually as well. So while we did try out sort of the standard, we did Zoom polls, we used chat, some teachers created a Google form with a couple of questions, and then they sent the link in the chat. I will say the tool that we found most useful was Screencastify Submit, which allows students to record a very short video. So I'll give you an example of this. From a basic 2 class, this part right here, the image that you see here is what the students see after they open the link. It will open a website that has the instructions. So in this case, they were instructed to look at a page in their textbook and then just say the vocabulary words out loud. And all they have to do is click record, and then immediately it starts recording. So here's an example of one student's response to this exit ticket.
Get up, take a shower, get dressed, eat breakfast, eat dress, go to work, get home.
Okay, so you get the idea. And the reason that we loved Screencastify Submit so much, and that we decided to go with this tool instead of the many other video recording tools out there, are because it does not require any account, or students do not need to log in to access it. Anyone with the link will go directly to the recording page. The first time they do need to click a couple of extra things to allow their microphone and camera, but after that, it's just 3 clicks. So we were always going for a limited number of clicks. And also it connects directly to Google Drive. So it was very easy for us to then use those same student videos and incorporate them into a class assignment, a homework assignment, made it really easy for students to listen and respond to their classmates' videos as well. All right, so that leads us into our final area of tech integration into our ESOL program, which was using technology for project-based learning. And this year, really the only projects that we did were video-based, because that's easier to do, and they were also sort of independent projects rather than group projects. So we will look at one example from our intermediate level class. A little bit of background, we were studying some vocabulary for different religions and different celebrations, and students created a video talking about one family tradition that they have, and then students then listened to and responded to their classmates' videos. So first, here is an example of one of our students talking about her family tradition.
Hi, my teachers and my classmates. Today, introduce about my family celebrates holiday. My family celebrates Eid al-Fitr, April 12th. Eid al-Fitr is a Muslim religious holiday. We celebrate 1 or 3 days. We go to Washington, D.C. for Hijra Islamic Center with my husband, my son, and my parents. For that day, I will make a lot of Ethiopian traditional and sweet dish. For example, doro wet, ketfo, dabo, injera, cookie, and cake. Then my favorite thing is to decorate the house. Also, charity to the poor is highly emphasized value in Islam. That means it is a day of charity. On that day, I will giving gift to any of her. I think you understand about a little bit my family holiday. Thank you.
So by creating this video, the students developed these skills. So not only writing and speaking, but also using their computer webcam, learning how to record on a digital platform, editing and revising both their language as well as their video, so re-recording their video as needed, and finally submitting that finished project. And we did use the same tools, Screencastify Submit, for this project because students were already familiar with it. You could, of course, use something else like Flipgrid to do the same sort of project. And then we noticed something that we really noticed, aside from sort of the regular benefits of project-based learning, were that doing these videos in a virtual setting really lowered the students' affective filter. So many of them who might have otherwise skipped presentation day in person or have been extremely intimidated to present in front of their classmates felt much more comfortable recording individually in front of a camera. They could also have the option to keep their camera off. And so that provided a little bit more freedom and flexibility for those students. And many of them commented that it was the first time they had ever heard themselves speak English. And so it created sort of this awareness of their own language, as well as pride and self-confidence that, like, I can speak in English for 2 whole minutes straight. So their self-confidence increased not just in English, but also in using technology. So at the end of this project, we asked them to reflect on 3 questions. What did they feel proud of? What was difficult? And what was their favorite part? So I will share just one student's reflection.
Hello. For me, I think it's difficult to speak in front of the camera, but the pronunciation too, because sometimes I don't pronounce very well the words, but it's okay. We are learning about that. I feel proud, happy for my video. My favorite part when I watch the video finishing. I feel good. I think this project was very nice for all the students because we can practice more speaking English. We learn about the the classmate. It's a good thing, a good project. It's very good.
To get a little sense of the student experience, the child crying in the background there. So overall, we got a lot of positive feedback from students about this project. And we hope to continue doing more of this type of project-based learning, even as we go back in person or move into a hybrid model. So just to sort of wrap it up, some of our biggest takeaways from this year in terms of making technology accessible to all of our students was first to use a limited number of technology platforms and really build up or increase that number with a lot of scaffolding. So making sure students know how to use one platform really well before we are adding on other tools, and then trying to use that same tool to accomplish a variety of different tasks. Second, always trying to limit the number of clicks as much as possible, as well as keeping in mind the repetition needed and providing differentiation for students at different technology skill levels. We also found that L1 support was extremely helpful, as much as we were able to provide that in terms of explaining how to use technology in the first language, as well as instead of teaching technology as sort of a separate skill or a separate class, using it as a tool for students to access and engage with English or with the other content, and that they really developed their skills much faster that way than the way we had been doing it in the past. And finally, as Jamie mentioned, that Zoom support role in the classroom was also extremely important in supporting the students that really needed a lot more digital support.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Kirsten. That was so interesting. Listen, I wonder, we just have a few minutes. I wonder if you can, I posted a question in the chat. I mean, my favorite thing about this whole conversation was how clear an understanding you have of where your learners are in this experience, how they were handling bringing on new technology demands and building their digital literacy skills, yet still staying engaged in their content learning. Can you say a little bit more about the decisions you made about gathering student input and then how you integrated that into your planning and your implementation?
Yeah, so I think we gathered input in a variety of ways. First, at the school level, we did send out a couple of surveys throughout the year to sort of get a big picture information from students about what their technology that they're using, how they're feeling about different things, how they're feeling that their skills are improving, what's still challenging. But I also think that most of it was gathered just through either one-on-one conversations that teachers were having with students. You know, something that we do regularly at BRIA is we follow up with students when they're absent. When we saw that a student wasn't completing work or connecting to Zoom for a week or two, teachers were calling them and having individual conversations, sometimes having, 30-minute long WhatsApp video calls, showing them how to use different tech tools and really finding out what was difficult for them and what they were learning most in their classes. And then I would also say those daily or weekly exit tickets at the end of each class, where students were recording those very short videos in response to maybe a reflection question or something, exit ticket that's measuring sort of what they learned in class, was also a really important tool in gathering that information.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much. There's a question here about where it's very concrete, specific. Where do you find the view your work on the Google Calendar?
That's a great question. So it's not actually on the Google Calendar originally within Google Classroom, and I can show this in more detail maybe in the breakout room. It's sort of like a page within Google Classroom that when you're logged in as a student, the student can click something that says like view my work.
Yeah.
And so we created a recurring calendar event on that student's calendar with a link to that page. So again, I can give you a more detailed look in the breakout room.
And then one more question I want to ask, like an overarching question for either of you. What you've been describing includes a lot of response and personalization to really make sure each learner is having a learning experience that's relevant for them and engaging for them. How did that, what I'm hearing across the country is that program enrollment might have dipped a little bit, but the persistence of the people who they did engage was actually like improved over the course of the pandemic. Can you comment on how that trend is either mirrored or not true at all at Berea?
Jamie, do you want to take that?
Sure, I can start and feel free to hop in. Yeah, I mean, I think we have seen that, yeah, like not everybody stuck with it, but students, once they sort of really got comfortable and understood, like the first term was really tough. You know, it was like not connecting, constant disconnecting, lots of confusion. But sort of once everybody kind of got the routine, some students really thrived in the environment because of all of the flexibility. Like they could do their homework at 2 o'clock in the morning if they needed to, you know, and as Kirsten mentioned, we have students that, you know, they're at work and they have our class on in their headphones, you know, so it really opened up, while it may have closed opportunity for some, it opened up opportunities for, I would say, a greater percentage of our students.
Yeah, I agree. I think we had probably a greater drop off at the beginning of the year, but then we were also able to enroll students for whom this program model worked better and was better suited to their needs. We had a lot more flexibility. We also offered the same class at 3 different times of the day. So they could connect at 9 or 1 or 3 and experience the same class at any of those times. And then we also implemented learning circles, which was for students that then started working all day and couldn't connect to any Zoom. We had a sort of a third option that was very independent learning, which Jamie also runs that program. So.
Okay, that's awesome. Thanks so much. Do you want to just keep, Kirsten, do you want to just keep the slides and just go to the next one? Great. So it doesn't look like there are any more questions in here. So I think we might just move on to our breakout discussions. And I believe you have the possibility of choosing the room that you want to go to. So Jamie and Jeff will be going to breakout room 1. And Kirsten and I will be going to breakout room 2. So at this time, I encourage you to choose the room. Jamie and Kirsten, you don't have a choice. You know where you're going, right?
Yes.
Awesome. I know where I'm going. I'm going to room 2. So, and we'll have a 30-minute, this is a conversation that is informal. It's a chance for you to ask the questions that you wanted to have a small discussion about. They can be big conceptual questions, or they can be, you know, like, hey, show me how you did this kind of questions. But we'll break, and then we'll just end the webinar like at that point. I think there's, and if you have any help, please note, if you need any help, please note Ebony's email address. And I think there's one more slide here. And these are the instructions for joining. So you click on the breakout room link, you join the room you want to go to, and then you need to hover over the number next to the breakout room to actually join that room. Jeff, any final goodbyes before we end the joint session?
No, I wish I could go to both rooms, but I'm happy to be in room 1. So thank you for all the hard work, and this is great information. Really amazing work you're doing with your students.
Right. Thanks everyone for being here, and I'll see you in a breakout room.